Welcome, everybody. Thanks for watching. This is part of our series where I get to ask our pastors questions and they answer because I know where they live. So I'm Ross Cochran and I am here with Elisabeth Lectka. Elizabeth, welcome.
Hello, Ross.
And I want to ask you about what we're starting to call faith milestones. This is not a new idea, but this is kind of new language here around Good Shepherd. And this is true for a lot of different churches. So you were someone who got confirmed here at Good Shepherd. And I want to ask you about what that means for us, but also kind of walking through the pathway. So to go all the way, zoom out as much as I can, when we talk about faith milestones, what are some of these events or key points that we're talking about?
Yeah, when we're talking about faith milestones in terms of kids' faith development or family faith development, we're talking about baptism and communion and confirmation. As a Lutheran church, we do baptism for infants. And part of that, thinking about just spiritual formation, faith formation, is allowing a chance for kids to be able to pick up the baton of their baptism and continue to walk with Christ. And we do that through a formalized education of confirmation. And so if you're in Catholic churches, Lutheran churches, Methodist churches, kind of the mainline Protestant denominations, you're familiar with these concepts and these things. And so what we're doing as Good Shepherd, our perspective on them is utilizing them as points for family conversation as parents are guiding their kids to understand who Christ is. We're using these milestones as blocks to help kind of have more formalized education and formational experiences for kids so that from birth all the way through confirmation and beyond, there are these points to have significant conversations at appropriate times and appropriate ways so that kids and students are able to engage and process and learn these things and what it means for them and their walk with Christ.
Yeah. What I really hope people take away from this conversation or any interaction you have with us here at Good Shepherd is these moments, although they might feel intimidating, they're meant to be invitational. Because I think there can be folks, maybe you're not someone who comes to church very often, or you're just new to this whole church and Jesus thing, that you
Mhm.
look at the idea of the class and you're immediately going, I don't know what questions my kids are going to ask because I don't know what questions even I have about this.
Yeah.
And the structure that you, your team, the folks who have stewarded this, that you guys are standing on the shoulders of, you are helping intentionally create space to meet people where they're at.
Yes. And I think that's I just started a confirmation like the next confirmation class we just started last week. And I had two students in my group who were pressing me a little bit after our conversation of just like, I have so many questions. I'm not sure if I believe this. I just don't know if I should really be here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you should. Like, this is the whole point.
Right.
And I think that is probably what feels a little different from the ways Good Shepherd does it to kind of what people maybe know from their background or their history, or for students like how their friends are talking about CCD at their Catholic church. Like
Sure.
we have spent many years revising and adapting and creating curriculum that is meant to foster those conversations wherever your kids or your family are at, because the goal is to walk closer with Jesus. Uh, and we want those conversations to genuinely be conversations, not checking a box or passing a test, but to say like, yeah, cool. You got questions about Jesus? Like that's literally what we're doing
Yeah.
is trying to help you understand the basics of Christianity.
Right. And I think it's important for people to hear that because these are experiences that are for anyone. As Lutherans, we believe that baptism is a sacrament, to use that as an example. But anyone who approaches us, we have a pathway for you.
Yeah.
And that pathway might look a little bit different depending on what your experience is,
Yep.
but there is a pathway for everyone. When we say invite everyone, this is one of the, I would argue, most significant ways that we live that out.
Yep.
To answer some of the basic questions that people might be having who are watching, if they are someone who is an adult, but they've never been baptized, what happens then?
And this is what I love about our faith milestones, and it's kind of what you've seen, Ross, from your perspective, even just entering that question is like we've set up faith milestones in a like um, formalized way for kids
Right.
and youth. For adults who want more information on it, like baptism, um, we would just kind of do a one-on-one conversation. At this point, it's like, cool, it would be great to offer an adult class on a regular basis. We've got those things in our brain, but also all of our pastors and like our ministry teams are well aware of why we're doing what we're doing.
Right.
And so, like, you're an adult that wants to get baptized, like, reach out. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk through the significance of baptism.
Yep.
And if you were baptized as a child, like, let's talk about why that matters today,
Yeah.
why that still matters today. Even if you had a journey where you walked away and came back or were asking these questions or feel like you fell away from the faith, like your baptism as an infant still mattered. So let's talk about the theology and the biblical understanding behind that so that you can understand that God has been with you the whole time. Um,
When
yeah.
there's language that we use around here that might be familiar to some people, but probably isn't, because it certainly wasn't familiar to me. When we say affirmation of baptism, what do we mean? And where do we get that language from?
hmm When we say affirmation of baptism, we mean the picking up of the baton from when you were an infant. We mean we often like affirmation of baptism and confirmation kind of are used interchangeably. Confirmation is the like formalized education that leads up to an affirmation of baptism moment. And really like there's not a whole lot of like Bible study I can point you to of like, hey, this is where the concept of affirmation of baptism comes from.
Right.
But we do in scripture have infant baptisms and adult baptisms, whole family baptisms, and like new believer baptisms. And it's from that concept of saying, well, how do we teach? It's from kind of sections in Hebrews that talks about like teach the basics, go back to the basics, understand the milk, the spiritual milk. Like it's that concept of making sure that all of us as disciples understand the basics that then the church in history has formed this concept of a confirmation process or an affirmation of baptism process so that somebody who was baptized as an infant can also have that process to say, oh, I do know this
Right.
and I want to keep walking in that direction and remember the fact that even though I'm approaching this water in a new or fresh way now, that doesn't invalidate the fact
Right.
that like at my baptism as an infant, God and the Spirit and Jesus was present there.
Right.
And I'm affirming and saying for myself that I know that these things are true still today and have always been true. So affirmation of baptism is like that. It's another step. It's a flag in the ground of sort of like, oh, I know that I've come this far and
Yeah.
I'm going to keep going. And I recognize that God has been with me up until this point too.
Yeah. I appreciate you answering that way. I think it's helpful for those who are with us to know like that's what happened for me. The
hmm
affirmation of my baptism as an adult in my case was this very spiritually significant experience for me
hmm
that does not take away from the sacrament
Yeah.
of baptism that happened
Yeah.
when I was an infant. And
Yeah.
um, but I think it's helpful for folks to understand that if you are someone who feels like you are on a quote unquote non-traditional path, there are those who have walked in front of you. And
hmm
more importantly, we are able to help meet you wherever you're at, no matter what the circumstances are.
Yeah.
We
Yep.
the one we haven't necessarily talked about a ton, but I want to make sure we uh, explain as clearly as we can in a short video is communion instruction. Can you
hmm
help folks understand what they can expect from communion instruction and why that matters?
Yeah. We offer like again the formalized communion instruction for kids who are fourth grade and up. And we often have quite a mix. Like it's primarily fourth and fifth graders, but then we'll have middle schoolers that jump in on that. And sometimes younger siblings will jump in on that too. And one of the reasons that we just call it communion instruction is because at Good Shepherd, we invite everyone to the table. That if you understand that Jesus died for you and that Christ is Lord, you're welcome at the table, which means as parents, your kid might be grasping that and understanding that as a kindergartner. Not in its fullness because they're a kindergartner and none of us understand it in its fullness, but we want to recognize that like we don't want made up instructions to hinder someone from approaching the table. At the same time, we have these made up instructions so that kids and families and parents have a way to talk about the significance of this together, why it's meaningful for us as a church, why it's meaningful for us in biblical history, why it's meaningful for us individually. And that's part of what we do in our instruction, like morning that we've created for parents and their fourth grader or older, is to have this conversation together, and to foster those conversations at home. And so we're creating an educational piece that is almost like a resource to families that helps to elaborate and enhance the understanding of communion for a fourth grader. Um, but if somebody is taking communion before that, that's not we don't want to put up any stumbling blocks along the way for somebody to like really engage in the fact that like communion is this incredible embodied sacrament for us.
Right.
So if parents are having those conversations on their own at home, great, like take communion and also do the communion instruction because you might have a different facet that you haven't talked about, or it's a different way that your kid is engaging with it as a, preteen.
For sure.
Um, and so that's kind of our philosophy or perspective on communion instruction, is being able to offer that as a resource and experience for families to walk through together, but not necessarily like you have to do this before you get there.
Yeah.
You have to know Christ as Lord. That's that's what we say when approaching the table, because that's what we're asked to do. And we don't want to put an abstract age on it because again, that's not biblical, but it is a tradition and a history for the Lutheran Church and the church at large. And so how do we meld those two things together in a way that makes sense for our people? And this is kind of where we settled at this point.
And I think it's going to be incredibly helpful. I am happy to be right in that age group with my oldest right now. So I'm
Sure
looking
are.
to jumping into that. But I just want to thank everybody for watching. Elizabeth, thank you for your time. If you are someone who's looking for more information, make sure you check out the show notes wherever you're watching. And we look forward to seeing you here on a Sunday morning at 9 or 10:45. Thanks.
Okay. Thanks, Ross.